Hi guys, Mike here from MDJM Event Management WordPress plugin. Just want to spend a few minutes today just to go through some of the changes that are up and coming in version 1.3, which I expect to be released in a couple of weeks, so the first week of May. There are a significant amount of changes in this release. Some of those changes are obvious. Some of them not so obvious, and some of them are not even visible to the eye because they're all mechanical changes in the back end. But I wanted to talk through a few of the changes at least. The first of those changes is around our employees. And we've always enabled businesses to register multiple employees within MDJM Event Management, but you've only really been able to utilize one employee per event, and the permissions associated have been very, very basic. So we've revamped the employees page. As you can see here, I've predefined some employees just for speed purposes. But we have a new employee table which gives us an overview of each of the employees. If they're an MDJM admin, which means they have full access to every module in MDJM and full permission to change all settings, and whether or not they're a WordPress admin, because you're just because you're one, it doesn't mean you're both. One of the biggest changes is that we have enabled you to now define roles. So you may have a photographer, for example, or an accountant who you need to provide access to MDJM Event Management to. And you can, as you've just seen there, you can very quickly add those in without even a screen refresh. In addition to that, you can very easily add a new employee. Let's just very quickly type the address in here. You select their role and then add the employee. During that process, if I'd have put a valid email address in there, an email would have been sent to employee 3 to tell them the URL they need to log in, their username and their password. All very slick, easy and efficient. In addition to that, you can now give an employee multiple roles. So we've created the photographer and the accountant. Well, perhaps employee 2 is also a photographer, as well as we've defined DJ here. I can simply drop this box and choose which role I want to add to that user, and they will now have employee 2, DJ and photographer. It's easy to set them back to a single role. Select one here, check the checkbox and click change. On the permission side, permissions are accumulative. So what I mean by that is, if me as an employee, if I have the role photographer, and photographer has permission to read own events, and I also have a role of DJ, and a DJ has permission to edit own events, then me as a user will be able to edit all of my own events, or events where I am working. On the right hand side listed are each of the a number of the modules within MDJM, and you can drop down and you can select the permissions that you want to associate with the specified role. If they don't have if a user logs in and they don't have permission to perform any of these actions, then those items will be missing from the menu. And if they happen to stumble across the page by accident somehow, then just a message will be displayed just politely telling them they don't have permission. Key thing here is this MDJM admin box. Be careful when checking this against a user role. When you check this, the user will then be given full MDJM admin rights, which means they will see all menu items and be able to adjust and manipulate all changes and events within the system. Another big change here is, I know obviously a lot of you don't maintain your own websites. Perhaps you've got a web developer helping you. And one of the big issues that we had previously was that an administrator of WordPress also had full admin rights over MDJM. That's no longer the case. So I have created an admin user. Here, as you can see, they're an administrator within WordPress, but this user has no rights within MDJM. They weren't listed on that employee screen that we've just had up there. So what happens now is, if I edit this user, under the custom fields that we've entered onto the form here, MDJM Event Management, we have this new box named MDJM Event Staff, and that box has to be checked for an administrator for them to appear in the employee list. Before I go back to the employee list, let me just try and look at that for myself. So if I edit my own user account, you'll notice that that box does not appear. So a WordPress administrator cannot make themselves an administrator of MDJM. Another administrator has to check that box on their behalf. As I say, once that box is checked, back to the employees page, and admin 1 is now listed here, and as you can see is now an employee within MDJM. Other changes associated with that on the events screen. Obviously the ability to add additional employees to events is now required, and as you can see here already on event number 21, we can see that employee 1 is listed to work that event as well as Mike Howard. Subtle changes here. All of these filters are now set up. You can filter by event type, you can filter by employee, and you can filter by clients as well. Filtering by an employee will list all events that an employee is working in or at. If we go ahead and edit an event, so if we look at event number 21, we can see the DJ field has now disappeared from event details, and we've created this new event employees box here where you can assign a primary DJ, as we've referred to it. You can assign a wage for that individual, and you can also add additional employees here. So for example, to add another employee in, simply select the employee, select their role, and select their wage for the event, and then simply click add. It's all dynamically updated. You don't need to refresh the screen. And removing an employee from event is just as easy. Just click on the remove, and that employee will go from the event as well. Other changes we have under our availability checker. There's been some significant changes around the employees, so we needed to update the availability checker under the client zones, and there's just a new option in here that enables you to define which roles need to be available on the selected date for the availability to report back that you are available. So any roles that you have highlighted here will need to be reported as available in the system. We've moved inquiry sources and playlist categories. These used to be settings. They've now been shifted and are now presented in a screen like this. You can edit any of them, you can delete them, you can add new ones, and you can also select defaults as well. Defaults are the ones that are initially selected when you land on the page. So for a client editing a playlist, in this instance, if I set this as default, first dance would be the first item that's selected in that drop-down list. And we've also added the set default category to the event types as well. Our shortcodes have all changed, but don't worry too much about that. I won't go through that in detail now. The old shortcodes still work for pages. Also the text replacement shortcodes, they've all now changed to be lowercase. We've added some new ones in there, but again, the uppercase ones from previous versions will still be fully supported and still work. We've added in templates, which essentially means the way in which we present the client zone pages to your clients has now completely changed. So instead of having what was a relatively static page where you could not edit any of the layout or the content without losing those changes when we updated the plugin, we've now created these template files, and if you copy those files into your theme or your child theme, then MDJM will read from there instead, and you can adjust those files to suit the look, feel and layout of your own website. You can even manipulate the content to be displayed in there, so long as you know how to code HTML and etc. And that also means that when this plugin is updated, or indeed when you update your theme, those changes, if you've applied them correctly and use child themes, you will not lose your changes. They will never get overwritten. Final change, just as a quick mention really, this new widget on the dashboard area is kind of really just a preview of an up-and-coming change that we've got coming in the next version, which is still a few weeks away, but we're going to be focusing on reporting, financial data, event statistics and all that type of stuff, and this is just really giving you an overview of what's to come, but it gives you some data month to date, year to date, and for the previous year as well. Many other changes. I won't go through them all. Some of them are really subtle. For example, you can change where this appears on the menu. We've always referred to everything as an event. You no longer have to do that. You can change it to be party, you can change it to be disco, you can change it to be whatever you need it to be. There's a lot of subtle changes like that. There's significant changes in the code to take us from where we were a commercial plugin, where it's a closed code set. Nobody else really contributing to the code other than ourselves. Now that we're open source, of course, that's all changing. So we've made the code much more friendly for others to get involved as well. So that's it. We'll continue with our final changes in order to get this release ready for around the first week of May. Feel free to write any comments underneath, and thank you very much for your continued support. Take care.